This is Farm Talk on Full Stroke Media. From the fields, farms, and rural communities that keep America moving. Hosted by Amy, one of the founders of the Veterans and Young Farmers Alliance. Protecting American farming, family farms, and the good Lord's lands for future generations to come. Powered by Full Stroke Media.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy with the Veterans and Young Farmers Alliance, and today I want to talk about something that has been weighing heavily on my heart. Who gets to farm America tomorrow? This is actually a two-part series. This is the first part, and I want to have an honest and real conversation, not an argument, not a political fight, not an attack on anybody. Just a conversation about the future of American agriculture. Because early this morning, I read an article about Riverview LLP and the way they're working to cultivate the next generation of dairy leaders through their internship program. And my first reaction wasn't anger. It was sadness. Because I started thinking about those young people. They're learning agriculture. They're learning dairy, they're learning management, operations, finance, technology, and what it takes to run a modern agricultural enterprise. And that's a good thing. We need young people in agriculture. We desperately need them. But it did make me stop and ask a question. And I think it's a question that all of us need to be asking. Who is making sure that those same young people have the opportunity to actually own a farm? Because those are two very different things. We can train the next generation to work in agriculture. We can train them to manage agricultural operations. We can give them degrees, internships, certifications, experience. We can teach them every single piece of technology available. But when that young person is finally ready to say, I want to farm for myself, where do they go? Where do they get the land? Where do they get the capital? Where do they find an affordable opportunity to actually begin? And that's where this conversation gets very difficult. Because America still has family farms. In fact, family farms made up about 97% of American farms in 2024. So no, the family farm isn't dead, but we do have to look deeper than that number. Because small family farms represented the vast majority of farms while operating a much smaller share of the nation's agricultural land, and larger family operations, although representing a much smaller percentage of farms, control a significant share of agricultural land and agricultural production. So this isn't as simple as saying corporations are taking over everything, because that's not the whole story. The reality is way more complicated. Agriculture is becoming more concentrated, and concentration matters. Because when land becomes more expensive, when capital becomes harder to access, when infrastructure becomes concentrated, when processing and markets become increasingly consolidated, the young farmer trying to enter the industry isn't just competing against another farmer. They're competing against systems with enormous resources. And that brings me to what's happening in Minnesota. Riverview is proposing to expand its West River dairy from approximately 7,855 cows to 18,855 cows. That is an increase of 11,000 cows. If approved as proposed, the operation would represent approximately 26,397 animal units. It would become one of the largest agricultural operations in Minnesota and the largest dairy operation in the state. The proposal also involves approximately 13,200 acres for manure application. Now, before anybody misunderstands what I'm saying, let me make something clear. I am not saying that there was no environmental review. There was. There was an environmental assessment worksheet. There was public comment period. There was a public meeting. There are permitting requirements. Those processes matter. But I think we still have to ask the bigger question. When an agricultural operation reaches unprecedented scale, shouldn't we be asking unprecedented questions? Questions about water, about groundwater, about soil, about manure management, about nutrient runoff, about watersheds, about cumulative impacts, about what happens if something goes wrong, because eventually something will. And questions about what an operation of this scale means for the communities around it. Those aren't anti-farmer questions. Those are responsible questions, because water doesn't care who owns the farm. Water doesn't care whether the farm is family owned. Water doesn't care whether the farm is employee owned or if it employs 10 people or even 100 people. A watershed doesn't care about the size of somebody's balance sheet, and neither does the future. And that's where I want to leave you for today, because the question isn't simply whether America needs more agricultural workers, because we absolutely do. The question is whether we're creating a future where those workers can eventually become farmers themselves. That's the conversation we're going to continue in part 2. I'm Amy with the Veterans and Young Farmers Alliance. This is Farm Talk, and we'll see you next time.
This is Farm Talk on Full Stroke Media. From the fields, farms, and rural communities that keep America moving. Hosted by Amy, one of the founders of the Veterans and Young Farmers Alliance. Protecting American farming, family farms, and the good Lord's lands for future generations to come. Powered by Full Stroke Media.